Welcome to the Chasing Spirituality podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and I'm so excited that you're joining me today. Each episode is full of heartfelt and expansive content that will really help you expand your consciousness and grow as a person. I created this podcast because I wanted to share my own personal experiences on my spiritual journey, but I also wanted to meet others and have them share what they've been through and how they've gotten to where they are today. If you haven't done so already, it would really mean a lot to me if you could rate and review the podcast. This really helps the podcast grow and reach more people, but it also allows me to get more guests on the show. Now on to today's topic.
So the Akashic Records for me, and my overall definition is it's kind of like a book of life. Okay, so it's like the records of everything, what has happened, what is currently happening, and what is to be. Now, because this is such detailed and sensitive information, there can be some difficulty getting responses. And so if you've had a session with me before, or you've listened to any kind of teachings that I've done on the Akashic Records, I always tell people that your question is the most powerful and most important thing of accessing the records, because the records will only tell you what you need to know, and they match the frequency of your question. So if your question is really vague, you may get a really vague response, but the more meaningful, the more powerful, the more connection that you have to your question and wanting the answer, the more meaningful and powerful the response typically is. The way that the records have worked best for me is to stay away from yes or no questions. And when I ask them why, they don't really respond very well to yes or no. And sometimes they will, but sometimes they avoid responding. And I've asked them why, why can we not ask yes or no questions? And their response is because of free will and because things change frequently. So they can kind of give you an idea of whether it's leaning towards yes or leaning towards no, but they never like to just say yes or no, because there's so many factors that go into that response, and there's so many things that can happen that can change that. Another thing about the records is they don't like for you to ask should questions. And again, it's because of the free will aspect. If you ask, should I do this, or should I do that? Should I go here? Should I go there? They're not going to want to answer that, because they feel like that's taking away your free will. They feel like they should never tell you what you should do. They're only simply here to provide information, to provide you with guidance and details that can help you decide what you should do. So some of the questions that I encourage people to ask when working with the records is like why questions. Why did this happen? Or why do I feel this way? Or another one is how. How can I be more in alignment with my best self? Or how can I achieve this goal that I have? So how questions are really good, why questions are really good. Asking about past lives, that's a big one that gets brought up as well, because again, this book of records holds all information. And past lives is fine to ask in the records, but it's not the same as a past life regression. If you're getting a past life regression, they're going to typically, from my experience, take you back in a hypnotic state and allow you to experience the past life so that you can get all the information and all of the details. Whereas Akashic Records answering questions about your past life, it's going to be very specific. And they tend to only want to answer things that are relevant to you in your current life. So if you ask questions about a lifetime and there's no way that it can benefit you or help you or kind of guide you in any specific direction currently, your answers about the past life may be very vague, or they may even refuse to answer. And that's another thing about the records, is I can't really control what they want to answer and what they don't. Sometimes they will ask you, why are you asking this question? I've had that happen before, where they're like, what's your purpose for asking this question? What is it that you're really looking for? Because it's all about intention, right? And intention powers everything. Intention powers our magic within us, and empowers everything in our lives. So it's really important to know what your intentions are behind the questions that you're asking. And if your intentions are unclear, your answer may be unclear from the records. Another question that comes up a lot in the records is life purpose. A lot of people want to know what their life purpose is, and I get it. That's a very common question. We all want to know what direction we're on, where we're going, if we're on the right path. And I'll just go ahead and save you the trouble. Don't ask that question, because they always give a similar response. And the response is always, you're on it. You're on the right path. You're living your life purpose, because to them, they feel like every life that we have, every encounter that we experience, everything that we go through is part of our life purpose. Your entire journey is part of your purpose, because throughout your life, you're meant to learn certain things. You're meant to experience certain things, witness certain things. And depending on your choices and the steps that you take, you're going to experience all of that. Sometimes we choose a path that takes us down more heartache and more pain, but that doesn't mean that you're not on track. That doesn't mean that you're not living your purpose, because that means that your soul had something from that experience. Even if it was more painful, it still had something it needed to learn from that. So when it comes to life purpose questions, that's kind of the overall response that you're going to get. Now, it does change a little bit from person to person, depending on what they need to hear. But overall, that's usually kind of the answers that come through from the records when you ask about life purpose. The next question that I wanted to touch on is, who can access the records? Everyone. Everyone can access the records. Now, I will say that the more that you work on yourself, the more that you work on your own healing and on your own wounds, you will naturally raise your vibration. Your frequency will naturally become higher, and it will be easier for you to access the records. It will be easier for you to receive the answers from the records, because again, this is like it's a frequency. It's a frequency that we tune into. And if you're not vibrating at a high frequency, then you may not be able to receive the way that you need to receive. So anyone can access though. Anyone can access the records. It's not limited. Now, I've heard certain teachers in the spiritual community say that not everyone can access the records. I've heard people say that you need a certain level of clearance, and that certain teachers have more clearance than other teachers. I don't buy into that. I don't believe that. I've been working with the records for a long time. Before I had any training or any experience, I was accessing the records for myself and for others, and didn't even know that that's what I was accessing until I was able to get more in tune with that frequency and figure out what was happening. So I don't believe that the records are limited. I don't believe that anyone has more access than the other, only factoring in your own vibrational frequency. And the higher your vibrational frequency is, I do believe that that can allow you to access more information. Because if you think about frequency kind of the same way you think about knowledge, if someone is talking to you about quantum physics and you know nothing about science or even anything about physics at all, it's not going to make sense to you. It's just going to right over your head, So the same thing with frequency. Whenever we channel information from our guides or from the records or from any other higher density being, if our vibration doesn't sync up and our vibration doesn't match with that information, it's not going to sit with us. It's not going to resonate with us the way that it should. So that's kind of how I see the records. I do kind of see it as maybe like a staircase, so everyone can access like the first couple steps of the records. But the more work that you do on yourself, the more healing that you do, and the more work you do raising your own vibrational frequency, the higher up you can go, and you can get more information, and you can channel a lot more detailed information and get through a lot more information. So that's kind of how I feel about who can access. So everyone can access. The next question that I had written down was how can you access the records? It's as simple as setting your intention. I believe that our intention empowers everything that we do. And I think that it's really important when we're doing any kind of spiritual work that we start being more intentional with everything that we do. And so if you want to access the records, you can. You simply need to set that as your intention. Now, there are certain beings, certain divine entities that can help you access the records. Sometimes that's your own spirit guides. A lot of times your own spirit guides can help you access the records, at least to the degree of your own records and what is connected to you and to your vibration. Certain angels can help you access the records. Specifically, I work with Archangel Raziel and Archangel Metatron. Those are the two archangels that I work with that help me access the records. If you don't work with anyone specific, that's totally fine. A lot of people that work with the records, they simply just call them the keepers of light and knowledge, and they ask them to help them access these records. Now, depending on the teacher that you speak to and the modality of accessing the records, there's many different ways that they will tell you to access. A lot of people, there is a teacher, she has a book about the Akashic records. I want to say her name is Linda Howe. She has a book and she has courses on accessing the records, and her method is a prayer. So she says she has a specific prayer that you can say and recite and repeat, and this is supposed to help grant you access to the records. There's guided meditations that you can do to help you access the records. Again, my personal belief is to just do what feels right to you and have that intention. Your intention is what I believe empowers it. For me personally, when I access the records, I do say a prayer or an intention, and I say it silently inside my head. I've heard certain people say it out loud. Mine isn't anything specific. It's not a prayer that anyone else has. I simply just reach out and say, I'm wanting to access the Akashic records for myself or for my client to obtain knowledge that can really help this person heal, that can answer this person's questions in a way in which they can understand. Please open the doors to these records so that we can access this divine information, and it can lead to more clarity and more healing on their light path. So that's kind of like a summary of what I may say. And again, it's not written, so I may change it. I kind of just go with my gut and say what feels right to me. For me, once the records are open, I do see like doors open. Some people are not visual, so you may not see anything. You may just get this inner knowing. You may just get this feeling in your chest that tells you the records are open. You may get shivers. You may get this warm sensation in your gut or in your heart. And so I just encourage you, if you're planning to access the records on your own, to just trust yourself, because that's the hardest part. The hardest part is trusting that we are tuning into this frequency. But it's just like your radio. You know, you can tune in to many different channels. Well, the Akashic records is a channel that you can tune into. So just allow yourself to play around with it. There are some guided meditations that I found on Spotify and I think some on YouTube that are supposed to help guide you into the records. I've used one on Spotify years ago, and I found it really, really helpful. I find it easier to ask, to have someone else ask me the questions, because sometimes it's hard for me to go back and forth in between Megan and what Megan is thinking and what Megan wants to know, and what the Akashic records are saying and what they're channeling. And so if you don't have anyone that you can play around with and have them ask these questions for you, I recommend channeled writing. Channeled writing or automatic writing is a really good way for you to tap into this frequency and be able to receive information. Or if you're more of a vocal person and you don't really want to write, you can get a voice recorder and record your responses and then go back and listen to them, because I think that also helps with the validation portion. Because when we channel, we're there, but we're not there. It's like we're there and we know what we're experiencing and we can hear it and we're receiving it, but part of us is like checked out a little bit, and it's because of our brainwave state and how it changes. So we don't always retain everything that we're channeling and everything that's coming through, because it's not coming from us. It is truly coming from a higher power. So if you're able to record it some way, whether it's with a voice recorder or write it, or allow someone else to be witness to what you're channeling, it can really help with the validation and allow you to see the differences in between what you were saying and what the record said. Because every time I go back and I listen to sessions, or I listen to times that I've channeled, or I'll go back and I'll read my automatic writing, I'm always like, oh, wow, I don't remember saying that, or that's really cool. I didn't remember that part of it. And it's because it's not really coming from me. It's not part of me. It's coming from somewhere else. And so the last thing that I want to touch on before we move on to questions that anyone may have is asking permission. If you are planning to access the records for anyone else other than yourself, it's really important that you ask for permission. You automatically have access to your own records unless there's information that you're not supposed to know or information that you're not privy to yet. I have heard of cases where people have been blocked from their own records because of past life situations, past life trauma, past life contracts. This has not happened to me personally or with any client that I've ever had, but if you guys remember Katish Haberfield, she's been on the podcast a couple of times. She has her own podcast called The Infinite Life, and she actually talks about her experience when she first started working in the Akashic Records and how she was blocked. And she had to actually go to an Akashic Records reader to help her through that block. And it was linked to a past life where she had a lot of pain and a lot of trauma around allowing herself this information to heal. So if you're working on asking questions for anyone other than yourself, make sure that you have their permission. And it's really important that they be present for that, because this information can be really sensitive, and it's information that is linked to not just us on this physical plane, not just us in the here and now. It's linked to our soul. So it's very, very deep. It's very, very personal. And it's really important that you ask for permission. If you're not asking for permission, I have heard that the records will shut you out. So just keep that in mind, that is very, very important. So that is all the questions that I had written down that I knew I wanted to cover about the records. At this point, if you have a question that you want to know about the records, not about yourself, not that you want to ask the records personally or collectively, but about the records in general, you can put it in the comments in the meeting chat, There should be an option to chat at the bottom. And if you don't see that, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. If no one has questions, then we can move on to the exciting part where we're going to actually channel the records and see what comes through. So I'm just going to give you guys a couple minutes to make sure nobody has questions. But Akashic records, they're slowly becoming my favorite type of reading. I always feel so energized afterwards. And I think it has to do with the frequency in which I tap into. It is, like I mentioned earlier, it's a higher vibrational frequency. And so when I tap into the records, I have to meet that vibration. And if you've had a session with me in the records, you know that I'm there, but I kind of just let it flow. I don't judge it. I try not to let Megan come in and use her psychic gifts or use her mediumship gifts. I simply just try to let the records take over. And so it raises my vibration. So I'm always so energized after I do Akashic Records readings. And then it's really fun. And it's always really surprising the information that comes through for me and for the clients.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you love. And it would mean so much to me if you could rate, review, and subscribe so that the podcast can reach and assist more people. Until next time, I'm sending you so much love.